Mrs. Love for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I believe that the United States House of Representatives is the branch of government that's closest to people. And hearing the concerns on both sides of the aisle on the structure of the Federal Reserve System is a concern of mine also. And if you couple that with the FOMC structure and the interests and the economic priorities of Americans, especially in Western states like Utah, with the answers that have been given, I'm still not convinced that the Western states are represented as well as the Eastern states. So with that thought, and that knowing that concern, I don't think it's enough to just say, well, we believe that it's working well, because you do have members on both sides of the aisle that are expressing concerns, and I happen to agree with those concerns that they're expressing. So I guess I would like to know what you think might be done to rebalance the Federal Reserve System to ensure that all Americans are equally represented in monetary policy discussions. President, do I call you President, George? Is that okay? Yes. Since you're on the board, go ahead.
Hi, good. So your question is an important one for the Federal Reserve. And as I've listened to this discussion, I remain convinced it is a question of accountability and not of the structure of the Federal Reserve. So in the case of Western states, I happen to have a few of those in my region, Wyoming and Colorado, the northern part of New Mexico. We are intentional in picking up information. In fact, today you will see coming out of the Beige Book, which is released by the Federal Reserve, a sense of each region, which directly includes those kinds of.
Okay, so I guess the question I'm asking is that I know that you are convinced that it's working, but like the reason why I mentioned the House of Representatives being closest to people is that every single one of us are talking to our people, we're talking to our bankers, and they share those concerns also. So again, I know that you feel as if it's representative, but I'm trying to look for different ideas where that thought, they may feel like they are being more represented. Yes.
Yeah, so the important thing to keep in mind is that although the Federal Reserve, as we've described, is deeply engaged in understanding the entire country, we have just one monetary policy for the whole country. Mm-hmm. The set of interest rates we set at the FOMC apply in financial markets, and they set monetary conditions for the whole country. So while President George or President Williams from San Francisco or myself can go and explain what conditions are like in our district, it's still, as in this body, we have to make the case that it's good for the country as a whole, one policy change or another. So there's a matter of understanding, and then there's a matter of what tools do we have. Now here, in this body, you have tools that can address things in one particular district or another. We do not have that. We do not have a way to target monetary policy to a particular region.
Okay. So if all else were equal, why? What difference would it make then if there were? Not to say whether I agree or disagree with this, but if there were more representation on the Western side, then that shouldn't change things either. Then,
well,
if that's the argument that.
So in my view, the question was asked earlier. If we would it, what our prediction would be for how the districts would be drawn, were they to be drawn again today, and I think it's a fair prediction that they'd be different. Would we be worse or better off in terms of how the Fed engages? I think we'd be about the same, and I think this goes to the way Mr. George framed it, which is that the structure doesn't impede us. We'd probably be as good as we are now, perhaps better, but it wouldn't make a big difference in my mind for the degree to which we are connected.
Of course, I end up with about 30 seconds, but President Lacker, just to switch gears very quickly, you, in one of your speeches, investing in people as economic growth strategy, I just want you to give a brief description on why district bank presidents would be interested in workforce development and why that would be a good thing.
So when I look around my district, Carolina is deeply affected by manufacturing and the like, and what's gone on in the last couple of years. It's hard to think about economic conditions without thinking about workforce and labor markets. And when you think about how labor markets work and what kind of transformation the Carolinas have gone through, for example, it's hard not to think hard about skills. And then you're thinking about, well, how do people acquire skills? How does the changing demand for skills affect people's choices? What can we do to enhance the rapidity with which our labor force adapts to the changing mix of skills that our economy seems to need?
I'm out of time. Thank you.
General Lady's time has expired, and speaking of the Carolinas.